In this video, we're going to talk about why I don't use smartphone gimbals and Osmo pocket-sized cameras in my video production for YouTube. Welcome to another video. I'm Henrik Olsen, and if you want to hang out with me while I'm commuting, talking about different topics, then consider subscribing to my weekly tips, tests, and tutorials. Welcome to this car vlog. This is an experiment that I have been thinking about for a while, and that is to use the time that I commute to sort of answer questions from you guys. I have a nice little portable setup with my Osmo Action attached with a suction cup to the windshield. And because I'm driving, I won't be looking at the camera all the time, but it'll still give me a chance to sort of reflect and answer some of the questions that you have been asking on the channel. Some videos ago, I released my review of the Snubber V-Mate, which is a cheap budget alternative to the Osmo Pocket, offering 3-axis stabilized gimbal with the capability of recording 4K up to 60 FPS. That's a nice little camera, no doubt about that. But below that video, I got a question from Jet Martin, one of my subscribers. Thank you for that. Making a note that I rarely use pocket-sized cameras or pocket-sized stabilized cameras or phone gimbals as part of my video production. And he basically asked me if I could share my opinion on these two types of technologies. And let's start with one thing first. Let's start with the phone gimbals. I really like the idea of this concept that you have something that will allow you to really stabilize the footage of your smartphone. But there are basically two fundamental problems with that concept, apart from it's a bit bulky that you have to bring it along. And one of them is that the gimbal is often fighting the internal stabilization in the phone. And if you are having like an iPhone or something like that, it might not be possible to disable the phone's stabilization. And in that case, you will end up with a system where the phone stabilization system is fighting the gimbal stabilization system, and the end result will not be very good. And that might cause some big problems, but that is not the biggest problem in this setup as I see it. The biggest problem is that it doesn't solve the fundamental problem dealing with the exposure triangle when you're trying to record with your phone. The phone is a fixed aperture camera. At least most phones that everyone is using is a fixed aperture camera, so you have no way of controlling how much light that enters into the phone when you're recording. That means that the shutter speed will be raised to an extremely high level to keep proper exposure of the image. The end result of that would be that your footage will not look very smooth. It will actually look a bit choppy and jerky, because every micro movement that you will be doing with the gimbal will show up on the final footage. You can basically test this out with yourself. Simply do a panning motion with your phone and watch the footage and see how bad that actually looks. So in reality, to make that work, it does not differ that much from what you're doing with your drone. So you need to get hold of some ND filters to be able to slow down that shutter so you can get that buttery smooth footage. And with the drones, you can basically compensate a lot by just doing slow motions. And then it's not that visible with the jerkiness of the footage. But that's pretty hard with the phone actually, because you want to move around and film stuff. So it will look pretty jerky if you don't use filters to reduce the amount of light. On top of that, you need to get access to the manual camera settings to be able to have full control of the process. So to me, that brings a lot more hassle than it needs to be able to produce results that I can use for my video. It's so amazing that filmmaking is more accessible than ever before with all the camera technology available. I recently took a crash course on iPhone filmmaking, covering everything from apps to exporting, and found a lot of inspiration and in-depth know-how how to step up my filmmaking with just the tools that I have in my pocket. I found this course on Skillshare, which is also the sponsor of this video. If you don't know Skillshare, Skillshare is an online community that, much like Netflix, through a low annual subscription, offers you access to more than 20,000 courses. There is so much great stuff to learn on that platform. Skillshare's annual subscription fee is very affordable and comes in less than $10 a month. But you know what? You can test it out yourself. The first 1,000 of my subscribers that click the link in the description below will get 2 free months of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Let's get back to the topic. So what do you use instead? As Jed Martin noted in his comment was that I often use DSLR or action cameras for the stuff that I'm doing. I'm basically not using a DSLR. I do want to correct that. I did that in the beginning, but I switched to Sony a7 III, which is a mirrorless camera, which is not a DSLR camera. But in principle, it is like a high-end camera with some good optics and stuff. And I like to use that in my studio. Ooh, there's a car being thrown off the side. Okay. He is probably recording YouTube videos while he's driving. So let's just pay attention here. Okay, so I use this kind of camera in my studio because I like the full frame look that it produces. I had a ton of ideas how I could use this camera to up my video production, making some fantastic B-roll. But most of the time it basically just sits in the studio because it's much easier for me to just pick one of my action cameras, throw that in the back, and off you go on the road. I actually made a video about the gear that I'm using when I'm on the road. If you missed that video, you can access that through this card. Let's discuss pocket-sized cameras like the Osmo Pocket and the Snubber V-Mate. I basically don't use these kind of cameras because, of course, they add a lot of functionality to your video production and gives you a lot of options to do different stuff. But most of the time, I simply just need a camera with a wide angle. It needs to be reliable in terms of autofocus and exposure, and it needs to simply just work. When I turn it on, like the Osmo Pocket that I'm using right now, it should just produce a wide enough image that I will stay inside the frame, and it should also record decent audio. In this case, I'm actually using the audio recorder as a supplement because I don't really know how this will turn out with me in the car. I just use that as a second source or a backup source of the audio in case that the audio from the Osmo Action is not good enough. But baseline is that I need some reliable cameras that I can bring along. So the Osmo Action is one of my favorites. I like that because it has the LCD screen in the front. That makes it very easy for me to sort of frame the scene that I'm using. I'm always over capturing the image using maybe 2.7K or 4K, which means that I can crop into the size or to the look that I want of the video later. I also bring along very often my GoPro Max. That's a very useful camera for me to bring on the road because it has really good audio and it has superior stabilization. Instead of having a 3-axis stabilized gimbal that is a bit fragile and you have to be careful where you put the camera and all that sort of stuff, the GoPro Max that basically just uses the 360 sphere and then it punches out a 1080p picture inside there, so that offers a lot of good stabilization. The pocket-sized cameras also have this disadvantage that it's actually not very stable. You need to learn to walk in a certain way to be able to produce smooth footage with a 3-axis mechanical stabilized gimbal. And the reason for that is that it basically cannot absorb a movement that goes up and down, and that will show pretty clearly on the image. Something you won't see with the GoPro Max because it's digital stabilization. So this is basically why I'm not using a mechanical stabilization, is that it doesn't fulfill the needs that I have when I'm on the road. So I just need something that's very easy to bring along, set up and get going. I'm pumping out a lot of videos, so turnaround time for me is more important than a super high production value. I find it very useful to be able to record these videos very fast and then just having maybe 3-4 camera angles in play at one time, and then put everything in the editing software and then slice it up into a final video. The technique that I use most of the time is basically that I turn on all the cameras and then I let them run in one single take, and then I do a lot of ums and ahs and stuff where I don't know what to say, but I can cut all that away once everything is aligned on the timeline. So that's pretty convenient. So what do you think about this new concept, answering your questions while I'm on the road? If you like it, then feel free to drop some of your own questions in the comment below, and I can do some nice follow-up videos answering your questions. I think this is a quite nice format for Q&A. Some of you guys noted that my eye did something strange the other day on one of the other videos, and that's because in reality I'm a robot, so I can do this. And sometimes I need a little bit of calibration. By the way, do you like my content? If you do, then feel free to give it a like. If you didn't like it, feel free to press the dislike button twice. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you around.